This podcast contains adult themes and graphic violence. Listener discretion is advised.
A commercial-free version of this podcast is available on Patreon for $1 per month. Patreon.com/Beyond Contempt Podcast. I'm Renee, and this is Beyond Contempt True Crime. You know me. I'm a Wisconsin girl at heart. So for this episode, I'm going to cover yet another crime from Wisconsin. This case received national attention. However, I feel like it is not well known. You're listening to episode 68, Glenn Kopitske. Glenn Kopitske had accomplished a great deal, despite struggling with his mental health. He went to the University of Texas in Dallas and graduated with a degree in historical studies. Glenn was diagnosed with bipolar disorder as a teen and collected Social Security disability benefits since he had a difficult time functioning in society. After college, he returned to Winnebago County in Wisconsin so he could live by his parents. His parents owned a farmhouse in Fremont, Wisconsin, and let Glenn live there rent-free. It was a remote area with no neighbors on a dead-end road. Glenn had some independence, yet he also had the security of his parents living close by. He worked part-time at Walmart in Appleton and would sometimes substitute teach in New London, Wisconsin. Glenn was interested in politics and officially declared himself a presidential candidate when he was 30, but didn't meet the age requirement since he was under the age of 35. In 2000, Glenn ran for the 56th State Assembly District seat, and in 2002, ran for the 6th Congressional District seat. He took part in local theater and was interested in comedy and acting, and was a lifelong learner who took courses through the UW system. 37-year-old Glenn Kopitske was lonely and had never married. His best friend was his dog named Riff. To combat loneliness, Glenn would often go out to the bars just to be around people. He didn't drink alcohol, but would have soda or pizza. Shirley and Virgil Kopitske stopped at their son's house on Thursday, July 30th, 2003. They wanted to check in on him and make sure that the trash went to the curb and he was keeping his place tidy. Glenn was excited, since he was due to receive a Social Security disability check the next day, and he wanted to take his parents out for a Friday night pizza. Friday, August 1st, 2003 came around, and Glenn did not show up to meet his parents. His mother called him on and off every 15 minutes with no answer. On Saturday, August 2nd, Shirley went to a wedding. When she returned home, she was worried that Glenn had not called her back, so she drove over to the farmhouse. Shirley thought it was strange that his back door was locked. He normally left the door unlocked. Even though Glenn had lots of time on his hands, he never made time to lock the door. Shirley found her son lying nude on the ground, and he was deceased. It had only been a few days, but the Wisconsin 80-degree summer heat had decomposed Glenn's body, so initially police thought the 37-year-old man might have died of natural causes. There was no evidence of a struggle. When a Milwaukee pathologist examined Glenn's body, there was brain matter leaking out of a quarter-sized wound in the back of his head, and there were stab wounds in the victim's chest and back. The perpetrator placed the barrel of the gun at the base of Glenn's skull, or slightly above, when they fired the shot. The gunshot on its own was fatal, and the stabbing was post-mortem. There was no other evidence found at the crime scene. Law enforcement was struggling to come up with a theory of what happened. They knew Glenn would visit the bars and developed crushes on some of the local women. One time, he even asked one to marry him. Many people in Fremont felt like Glenn was quiet, strange, and had problems engaging in conversations with others. He would often have car trouble, and when officers tried to help him, Glenn would tell them about all the medications he took without their prompting. He had not been taking his medications prior to his murder, and investigators were convinced that Glenn's erratic behavior might have caused someone to retaliate against him. He sometimes made people feel uncomfortable, even when he was religiously taking his medications. Law enforcement scrapped this theory when they learned that Glenn quickly backed down once a woman rejected him. When police went door to door, one neighbor said he had seen an older car with square headlights several nights prior that had traveled down the dead-end road Glenn lived on. There was a powerful light coming from the vehicle, and it appeared as if the passengers were looking at houses on the road. Police would go for months with no leads. In August 2003, a 17-year-old high school kid started telling his friends how he committed a murder. Gary Hirte met Olivia Thoma at the Waupaca County Fair. The two were getting into a discussion about some of the dumb things they had done. Gary told her he killed someone. The information freaked Olivia out. However, she didn't believe it. Gary Hirte was the first Eagle Scout that Weyauwega, Wisconsin had in 2 decades. Weyauwega is only about 1,800 people, so having an Eagle Scout is a major point of pride since only 4% of scouts ever attain that rank. A family friend worked with Gary on some of his merit badges and remembered that he was a fast learner. The Hirte family was respected in this small town, and everyone knew them. Gary's mother, Deanna, worked for the county, and his father, Mike, worked for a foundry. They also had another son and daughter who were both younger than Gary. Hirte was a polite kid. He was on the quieter side, and he got along with everyone. He was known for being level-headed and wasn't the bragging type, despite being a starter on the football team. Gary was 6'5" and 280 pounds. He was a defensive lineman for the Weyauwega Fremont High School and was a 2-time all-conference player. His teammates called him the Big Hirte. Glenn also ran track and wrestled at heavyweight. He was the class salutatorian with a 4.4 GPA out of a 4.0, presumably because he was taking AP classes. Gary also held a part-time job at Dairy Queen and was on the prom court. He had dated Olivia Thoma for a bit, and over fall and winter, the more they chatted in person, talked on the phone, and emailed, the more she believed he killed someone. Olivia learned that there had been a murder in the area during the summer, which hastened her suspicions. One of Olivia's friends issued a stern warning. If the murder story was true and she did nothing about it, Olivia could be in trouble as well. After months of careful consideration, Olivia Thoma walked into a local police station on January 1st, 2004, and told them her story. Law enforcement initially doubted her claim. Gary Hirte was the all-American small-town kid who was good at school and sports. But Olivia provided the police with specific details of the crime that had not been reported to the media. She told the police that the victim was shot in the back of the head with a 12-gauge shotgun and was stabbed 3 times. The Winnebago police asked Olivia if she would have a phone call with Hirte and talk about the murder while they recorded the conversation. After months of no leads, police realized that Gary Hirte went to great lengths to leave no evidence at Glenn Kopitske's house, but threw all caution to the wind in telling his friends about the crime. On January 28, 2004, Olivia called Gary Hirte while police recorded the call and listened in. Gary was having a movie night with a few friends when he received a random call from his ex-girlfriend. The conversation started out light and friendly, but Olivia brought up what they talked about last summer. She said the story that he told her bothered her, and she wanted to know if he really killed someone. Gary asked Olivia if she was going to turn him in. She promised she wouldn't. Gary wanted to drop the conversation. Olivia said she couldn't, because her conscience was giving her a hard time. Gary said he regretted committing the murder, but he couldn't take it back. He really didn't express sorrow for the victim and said that Glenn didn't have a family. Olivia reminded him that Glenn had a family, He had a mother, father, and siblings. Gary didn't want Olivia to hate him and wanted to know if she thought he was a psycho. When he described how he shot and stabbed Glenn, he spoke in a normal and calm tone of voice. Hirte said he committed the murder to see if he could get away with it. Olivia wanted to know why he even told her about the murder. He said he didn't think that she would care. Hirte wasn't interested in turning himself in because it would ruin his life, and he wasn't planning on ever committing another one. On January 29th, 2004, investigators went to Gary Hirte's high school to interview his friends. Eric Winslow had been good pals with Hirte since the 4th grade. Eric told investigators he was with Hirte in July 2003, and they were driving around shining for deer. For listeners who are unfamiliar, shining for deer is a common practice in northern Wisconsin, where people drive around the backcountry roads with powerful lights looking for deer. Deer are herd animals and feel safer at night, so that's when they get more active. Hunters and non-hunters take part in this practice, and often, after an evening of shining for deer, you end up at a local tavern. Anyway, police figured Hirte used the cover of Shining for Deer so he could case out Glenn Kopitsche's house. Hirte asked Eric if he heard about the Kopitske murder, since it was pretty close to Eric's girlfriend's house. Eric jokingly said that it sounded like something Hirte would do. Hirte told Eric that he killed a man, and he even showed his friend the 8-inch hunting knife he used and the keys he took from Kopitske's home. Eric thought that they were just random keys and could have been keys from anything. He thought his friend was just bragging, and Eric didn't believe he committed any murder. After the interviews at the high school, investigators felt confident that Hirte committed the crime. They called him down to the principal's office, where he was arrested. The day prior, Gary Hirte learned he won a $1,000 scholarship to St. Cloud State in the University of Minnesota college system. He also had an athletic scholarship secured and, ironically, planned on studying criminal justice. Investigators searched the Hirte home, and they found shotgun slugs, a black ski mask, handwritten diagrams, a hunting knife, 2 shotguns in the basement, and Glenn Kopitske's keys, which were above the door, resting on the door sill in Hirte's room. Deanna and Mike Hirte were shocked and had a hard time understanding why police were at their home. The Winnebago sheriff said that Hirte had been good at everything he ever attempted, which led to arrogance in committing the murder. They thought Hirte wore gloves during the crime because no fingerprints were ever found in Glenn's home. Police believed that Hirte committed the crime on a night with no rain as to not leave footprints, and on a night when there was no moon as to not be seen. Police tested the blood that was found in the sheath of Hirte's hunting knife. The DNA results showed that the blood belonged to Glenn Kopitske. When Hirte shot Glenn in the head, there was no exit wound, which reduced the chance of blood splattering on Hirte's clothing. The gun ammo used had generated over 16 foot-pounds of force. Glenn's nearest neighbor was a quarter mile away and didn't hear sounds from the gunshot. Police didn't understand why Hirte stabbed him twice in the back, turned him over, and stabbed him in the heart. They believe Hirte took the keys, which had a keychain tag from a chainsaw dealer, and kept them as a souvenir. Police figured Hirte locked Glenn's back door, thinking it might delay the discovery of the victim's body. When Hirte was confronted by investigators, he denied committing the murder and said the keys that were found in his room belonged to his grandfather. A Winnebago investigator said, Gary Hirte sought that victim out and stalked him, planned out the event, and then killed him. Why does someone who succeeds at everything he does want to do something like that? It's only speculation, but was it because he felt superior to all the people? Or because it was the ultimate challenge? Or because he was interested in law enforcement? Eventually, this murder was labeled a thrill killing by the prosecution and would become their theory of the case. Many thrill killers are male teenagers who don't fit into society and are socially awkward, but experts say this is not always the case. They can have many qualities, including being successful in the outside world, yet they experience inner turmoil because they feel inadequate. Power universally motivates them. Gary Hirte's arrest was extremely difficult for students at the Weyauwega Fremont High School. The school tried to meet the needs of their kids. The guidance counselor had an open-door policy. Teachers gave students time and space to express their feelings about what happened. They had factual discussions about the case, with no speculation allowed. It was also hard for the people who knew the Hirte family. A family friend said he couldn't fathom Hirte killing someone to see if he was smarter than the police. He didn't think anyone in town could believe that this was the case. The owner of the Waupaca Dairy Queen, where Hirte worked, said when he heard about the arrest, he thought it was a car or hunting accident. This hit hard for Hirte's co-workers, since he had worked at the Dairy Queen on weekends for the past 2.5 years. The owner said that Gary Hirte was an excellent employee, and they were standing by him, based on what they knew about his character, and were holding his job for him. Productivity. We all want to be efficient and do more with our time. I struggle with this in the mornings, as I don't enjoy getting up, and I'm usually foggy when I start work. But I want to introduce you to a drink that helps with procrastination and grogginess, called Magic Mind. Magic Mind is a green shot that you take in the morning, which you can take alongside your coffee, or not. I work hard on my day job, and I create content for this podcast in the evenings. It takes a lot of focus and energy to get everything done. I found that Magic Mind is easy to use, it tastes great, and it's helped my focus. There are a lot of top-notch ingredients in this drink, including lion's mane and cordyceps mushrooms, which help with clarity and focus. I would really encourage you to try it out, especially if you're having trouble getting it together in the morning. Check them out at magicmind.co/contempt. You can use my discount code CONTEMPT20 to get 40% off your first subscription or 20% off your first one-time purchase. My 40% off code only lasts for 10 days, so jump on it. That's magicmind.co/contempt. Discount code CONTEMPT20. On January 30th, 2004, Gary Hirte was charged with first-degree intentional homicide in the murder of Glenn Kopitske, and they set his bond at $200,000. In February 2004, District Attorney Bill Lennon wanted Gary Hirte's bail raised. The now 18-year-old Hirte called his 14-year-old girlfriend from jail and had a conversation that concerned the prosecution. The 14-year-old girl asked Hirte what he thought about all day when he was in jail. Hirte told her that I would like to kill myself with you. So like, together, so we could be together forever. Besides the suicide talk on the jailhouse call, Hirte's 14-year-old girlfriend had been living at Mike and Deanna Hirte's house. She used their internet connection to contact Gary Hirte's ex-girlfriend, Olivia Thoma, who had turned him into the police. The 14-year-old used Gary's screen name to contact and harass Olivia. The explicative-laden messages told Olivia to tell the police that she never dated Gary. This violated Hirte's bond. Hirte himself had reached out to a friend, who was also a witness, and this was another violation of his bond. The prosecutor asked for the bond to be increased from $200,000 to $500,000. Prosecutor Bill Lennon admitted he made a large error in asking for such a low bond. He put too much weight on the fact that Hirte was a salutatorian and an Eagle Scout. On February 26, 2004, the judge doubled Gary Hirte's bond to $400,000. They also ordered him to have no contact with the 14-year-old girl. Police looked into charging Hirte with second-degree sexual assault of the 14-year-old, but could not find solid evidence, so they did not file charges. Gerald Boyle of Boyle, Boyle & Paulus represented Gary Hirte. Gerald Boyle was well known in Wisconsin as the lawyer who defended convicted serial killer Jeffrey Dahmer. Later on, he also defended Mark Chmura of Green Bay Packer fame, who was acquitted of child enticement and third-degree sexual assault of his 17-year-old babysitter. Joseph Paulus worked on the defense team and filled in for Gerald Boyle. At the time, Gerald was in the thick of defending Father John Patrick Faney, the Green Bay priest who sexually abused many children. Paulus was a former Winnebago district attorney who crossed over to the other side when he went into private practice with the Boyles. At a pretrial hearing, Paulus tried to convince the judge that there was no evidence linking his client to the crime. The judge disagreed and said there was enough probable cause to move forward. In March 2004, Joseph Paulus had issues that strained his relationship with his law firm partnership. He was under federal investigation for wire and mail fraud. 2 years prior, when he was on the prosecution side of the law, they suspected he was colluding with defense attorneys to fix drunk driving cases. Paulus withdrew as counsel for Gary Hirte and resigned from Boyle, and Paulus. He ultimately pleaded guilty to tax evasion and bribery. Gerald Boyle was back on the Hirte trial and decided not to file for a change of venue. The case was already high profile and received national attention. Boyle figured that a change of venue would not help his client. Judge Bruce Schmidt had been in charge of the legal proceedings until September 17, 2004, when he recused himself from the case. It was not clear why he made this choice, and the reason was never pushed out to the media. On October 4, 2004, Gary Hirte entered a guilty plea, but then entered a secondary plea of not guilty by reason of mental disease or defect. Under this type of plea, the defense would have to convince 10 of the 12 jurors that Hirte had a mental disease at the time of the murder, and he lacked the capacity to understand right from wrong in that moment. Depending on the outcome, he could either get life in prison or could get sent to a mental institution until the judge decided he was healthy enough to be released back into society. The trial began on January 31, 2005. In a surprising turn of events, the Hirte team invoked a gay panic defense. Boyle claimed that for months, his client could not explain the reason for the murder, until there was a forensic report which determined that the victim's semen was found in various parts of his body. After the report, Hirte crumbled and told his lawyer what happened. Hirte claimed to have a chance meeting with Glenn Kopitske. He was listening to Nirvana while sitting on his car drinking alcohol when Glenn Kopitske drove up. Hirte was about 15 shots of vodka deep, which he washed down with a 6-pack of malt liquor. Boyle said that when Hirte drank alcohol, his homosexual urges surfaced and grew in intensity. He didn't understand his own sexuality, was the claim. Hirte and Kopitske talked about football, and by the end of the conversation, they agreed to go back to Glenn's house. Hirte said, "We both knew when he offered to go to his house, that's what we were going to do. Something homosexual." Hirte said that this was his first sexual encounter with a man, and everything was consensual. He left Glenn's house and went back to his car, but had consumed too much alcohol to drive, so he fell asleep. Hirte woke up later, having sobered, and was so upset with the encounter that he flew into a rage. He was grossed out and disappointed in himself. Hirte believed that taking part in homosexual sex was not as bad as rape or torture, but was worse than murder. So he went back to Glenn Kopitske's house, and that was what he did. He commanded Glenn to lie on the ground and shot him in the back of the head. Then he stabbed him twice, with the second blow being so deep that it got stuck in the victim's spine. He had to pick up Glenn's lifeless body with one arm so he could remove the knife. Then he turned Glenn over and stabbed him again. Boyle said that they polygraphed Gary Hirte about what happened, and he passed the test. John Lesion was a psychiatrist who testified for the defense and had famously examined Ed Gein for the prosecution decades prior. He believed that Gary Hirte experienced a psychotic depression reaction, despite his lacking a medical history of mental illness. Forensic psychiatrist George Palermo played a major role in the Jeffrey Dahmer case and determined that Dahmer was not psychotic or legally insane. In this case, Palermo testified for the defense and believed when Hirte murdered Glenn Kopitske, he experienced a micropsychotic episode, which was fueled by the shame and humiliation of having a same-sex encounter. Micropsychotic episodes can last up to 30 minutes. Palermo thought Hirte was insane when he committed the crime and also diagnosed him with borderline personality disorder. A person with BPD can be smart and have excellent social skills, but their inner life can be filled with depression, narcissism, suicidal thoughts, and other destructive behaviors. The doctor said that Hirte performed sex acts on Glenn that weren't reciprocated, and then Glenn asked him to leave, which was a painful rejection. Hirte then flew into a rage and couldn't stop the murder. Palermo said the killing was extra brutal because Hirte was trying to unconsciously kill his own homosexuality. He remembered nothing about the incident until he went to work the next day at Dairy Queen. The doctor felt that the prosecution's theory of Hirte trying to get away with a thrill kill made little sense, given his intelligence and good behavior. The doctors who testified for the prosecution felt that Hirte was sane during the murders. Psychologist Ed Buddha believed that there was no substantial mental illness. Psychiatrist Frederick Fosdil stated that people can act in unstable ways when they experience potent feelings of anger, but Hirte was not psychotic and understood right from wrong. There was no mental illness during the murder. The doctor said that Hirte's story only changed after his lawyer told him about the victim's semen that was found on the body. Hirte's close friend, Eric Winslow, testified for the prosecution. The boys had known each other since the 4th grade. The murder obviously strained their relationship. Eric was upset at Hirte and only visited him in jail one time because Hirte's parents applied pressure. He told the jury that Hirte slept over at his house, but then snuck out at night to commit a burglary. Hirte said he wouldn't care if his family died, and he would often swerve towards animals crossing the street instead of away. When he talked about murder, he lacked any kind of emotion or compassion. Hirte told Eric at least 3 times he murdered someone. But Eric never believed him until detectives pulled him aside. He didn't believe Hirte's story about homosexual rage and agreed with the prosecution that Hirte wanted to commit a murder to see if he could pull it off. Gary Hirte did not testify in his own defense, but his parents did. When they received a call from their daughter telling them of Gary's arrest, they were in disbelief. The first thing that ran through Deanna Hirte's mind was that her son was in an automobile accident. Then she thought, well, maybe he got into a fight to protect someone. After all, Gary was an all-star student athlete who had a part-time job and was active in their community. To her knowledge, her son didn't drink or do drugs. When Deanna and Mike Hirte visited their son in prison on March 13th, he told them that the charges were true. It was hard information for the Hirtes to digest. Deanna and Mike fully believed that their son's actions were motivated by having a gay encounter. Glenn's mother, Shirley Kopitske, testified that she did not believe her son was gay. He had an innocent crush on Britney Spears, and she was aware that he kept a collection of girly magazines at his house. Shirley was confident that her son was lonely and wanted to get married to a woman, which was why he went out to bars to meet people, despite being socially awkward. Her son struggled because of his bipolar disorder, and his life was extremely difficult. If he didn't make a daily to-do list, he would just sleep the whole time. Glenn struggled so much that the Kopitskes had to go over to his house to clean it and mow the lawn. Glenn's brother, Gregory Kopitske, agreed with the prosecution's thrill kill theory and knew that his brother was not gay. Gregory had not seen his brother for several years prior to the murder because mental illness had consumed Glenn's life. It made it hard for Glenn to find a relationship, but Gregory said he was always looking for a woman to date. An officer who was in Glenn's house after the murder testified how messy and unkempt the residence was. Dishes were not washed, medicine bottles were lying around in the open, and there were lots of journals full of his writing. Some of the writing had even been addressed to celebrities. It was apparent that Glenn struggled and had a lonely existence since he didn't have a partner or many friends. On February 4th, 2005, a jury comprised of 2 men and 10 women spent 2 hours deliberating on a verdict. They decided that Gary Hirte was sane when he murdered Glenn Kopitske. On March 15, 2005, the judge gave Hirte a life sentence and said that he would have the possibility of parole after 32 years, which meant Hirte would be at least 50 years old before he could ever leave prison. The judge said that Hirte felt superior to people, but underneath, suffered from an inferiority complex. This murder was a fantasy for him, and had it really been about humiliation after a gay encounter, he would not have kept Glenn's keys as a trophy. Deanna Hirte did not take her son's sentencing well. She said that the jury reached the wrong conclusion. The media sensationalized the trial and caused her family more pain. She believed that the gay encounter happened, and said that the victim's family was closed-minded for wanting her son to receive the maximum penalty. Deanna said that Glenn Kopitske was not guiltless and took advantage of her son. He took her son's innocence, and it cost him his future. Both of Hirte's parents said it was difficult for their son to admit to performing a homosexual act. Mike Hirte said he thought his son would accept a lifetime of prison if that meant he maintained his secret. When ABC News interviewed Gary Hirte, he said, "There's no reason I should be held accountable for this. That's just the way I feel. I can't change that. It wasn't this mind that's thinking right now that did that action, so I can't feel guilty for it." Hirte said he couldn't feel any remorse because Kopitske was another him, meaning another person who engaged in gay sex acts. Hirte's friends told ABC News about how he would kill animals by purposely running them over with his car. "I don't have any guilt for killing little animals because I figure I'm doing them a favor. It's just the way it's justified in my mind." Gary Hirte hasn't shown remorse for Glenn Kopitske or the Kopitske family, but Hirte's parents said he apologized for putting them through everything. Mike Hirte told Gary, "You did everything you could for me. There's nothing that you could have done any different." Prosecutor Bill Lennon summed it up and said that Gary Hirte fantasized about the murder, so he found a person who lived alone at the end of a dead-end road who didn't have neighbors close by. In Hirte's mind, Glenn Kopitske was a nobody, and the remote nature of his residence made him an easy victim. Despite Hirte being such an accomplished student-athlete citizen, he still had to brag to his friends about the murder because it was the only way he could feel satisfied. The prosecution said the sexual encounter between Hirte and Kopitske never happened. It was a fiction. Lennon said that he resented that Gary Hirte even used the gay panic defense, as if it somehow justified murder. Shirley Kopitske said that her son was different and was a bit of a loner, which made him a target. The trial was very hard on their family, but they were happy with the outcome. Olivia Thoma was awarded a $500 check and was celebrated for leading the police to Gary Hirte. Without her, this crime could have gone unsolved, and the Kopitske family was grateful for her actions. Gary Hirte is currently incarcerated at Waupun Correctional Institution in Wisconsin. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode of Beyond Contempt. Please visit BeyondContemptPodcast.com for the links to the sources and music used in this episode. Research, writing, editing, audio production, and sound design were performed by me, Renee. If you like the show, please leave me a positive review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Thank you so much, everyone.
Running through the dark, trying to find the light. feeling dead inside. Everything feels like a dream, it's all gone wrong. Waiting for a call, holding